Among the countless texts buried in history's shadows, one book stands apart, not for what it promises, but for what it delivers. The Emerald Tablets of Thoth weren't hidden in some dusty monastery or Vatican vault. They were deliberately suppressed because they contained something far more dangerous than heretical philosophy: actual instructions. While mystery schools spent centuries protecting fragments of this knowledge, initiates risked everything to study what Thoth had recorded. Not theories about other dimensions, but detailed accounts from someone who claimed to have traveled between them as both priest and immortal being. What makes these tablets extraordinary isn't their age or mysticism, it's their precision. They describe reality as layered planes where each dimension functions as both an energetic frequency and a state of consciousness. Unlike modern quantum speculation, Thoth provides specific methods for accessing these states. The real question isn't whether these techniques work. Mystery schools wouldn't have guarded them for millennia if they didn't. The question is why this knowledge was kept from you, and what those in power understood about human potential that they never wanted you to discover. Picture this: you're a high priest in ancient Egypt, guardian of humanity's most dangerous secret. In your hands lies knowledge that could instantly shatter every power structure on Earth. One revelation from these tablets, and suddenly people understand they're eternal beings, capable of transcending every limitation that keeps them obedient, fearful, and controllable. What do? You hide it. You bury it so deep that only a select few will ever glimpse its contents. The Emerald Tablets didn't just contain spiritual philosophy, they contained the operating manual for reality itself. And the priests who guarded this knowledge understood something that modern people have forgotten. Information is the ultimate weapon. Not swords, not armies, but the simple truth about what human beings actually are. Think about the implications for just a moment. If people discovered they were multidimensional consciousness temporarily inhabiting physical bodies, how long would they tolerate being told what to think, what to believe, how to live? If they understood that death was merely a transition between states of existence, would they still cower before threats of punishment in some distant afterlife? The ancient mystery schools weren't just educational institutions. They were sophisticated filtering systems designed to protect revolutionary knowledge from falling into the wrong hands. But here's what's fascinating. They weren't protecting it from evil people. They were protecting it from unprepared minds that might use it destructively or, perhaps more dangerously, from those who would weaponize it against humanity itself. The initiation process could take decades. Candidates underwent psychological testing that would make modern intelligence agencies look amateur. They studied mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, and sacred geometry not as separate subjects, but as interconnected aspects of a unified understanding of reality's structure. Only after proving they could handle progressively more reality-shattering revelations were they allowed deeper access. Consider the blood oaths these initiates took. We're not talking about fraternity pledges or corporate non-disclosure agreements. These were sacred vows backed by the understanding that revealing certain knowledge prematurely could literally destabilize civilization. The penalty wasn't death because the priests were cruel. It was death because the consequences of misused knowledge were considered worse than individual survival. But why such extreme measures? The tablets describe reality as containing infinite dimensions of existence, each operating according to specific principles that most humans never suspect. They explain consciousness as a creative force, capable of manipulating what we call physical laws. They reveal techniques for accessing states of awareness where time, space, and matter become malleable. Imagine if this information had been freely available during periods of human history marked by warfare, conquest, and empire building. Picture Alexander the Great or Julius Caesar with access to consciousness-altering techniques that could bend reality itself. The mystery schools understood that certain knowledge required not just intelligence, but wisdom, compassion, and spiritual maturity. The encoding methods they used were masterpieces of protective intelligence. Sacred geometry wasn't just pretty patterns. It was advanced mathematics disguised as art. Mythological stories weren't just entertainment. They were precise instructions for consciousness development, hidden in symbolic language that only prepared minds could decode. Temple architecture wasn't just impressive building. It was three-dimensional textbooks encoding the principles of multidimensional physics. This brings us to something remarkable happening right now. We're compiling the most comprehensive research on these suppressed teachings through our Insights Academy newsletter, including a complete analysis of the Kybalion, Hermetic principles so powerful they've never been fully explained on any public platform. This isn't information you'll find through normal channels because, frankly, It's still too dangerous for general distribution. But here's where the historical pattern becomes chilling in its modern relevance. The same mechanisms of information control that ancient priests used to protect knowledge are now being used to suppress it entirely. Instead of careful initiation processes designed to prepare minds for expanded understanding, we have educational systems designed to limit thinking to narrow, controllable parameters. Instead of mystery schools that gradually revealed the nature of reality, we have media systems that actively promote confusion, distraction, and intellectual dependency. The priests feared people weren't ready for the truth about their infinite potential. Modern power structures fear people are becoming too ready for it. The difference is intent. Ancient guardians suppressed knowledge temporarily, until individuals proved capable of handling it responsibly. Contemporary suppression aims to prevent people from ever accessing their true capabilities. One was protection, the other is imprisonment. What's particularly striking is how the tablets describe human consciousness as naturally multidimensional, capable of perceiving and interacting with realities far beyond our three-dimensional experience. They explain that what we call supernatural abilities are actually natural functions of consciousness that have been systematically suppressed through cultural conditioning. The ancient priests understood that a population aware of its true nature couldn't be controlled through fear, scarcity, or manufactured conflict. People who knew themselves as eternal, powerful, creative beings wouldn't accept artificial limitations on their freedom, their potential, or their understanding. This is why the tablets were hidden. Not because the knowledge was evil, but because it was liberating. And throughout history, nothing has threatened established power more than human liberation. The mystery schools eventually fell, their libraries burned, their initiates scattered or killed, but they had prepared for this possibility. The knowledge was encoded into art, architecture, literature, and mathematical principles that would survive the destruction of institutions. Hidden in plain sight, waiting for humanity to become ready for its own awakening. The question that haunted ancient priests was whether humanity could handle the truth about reality's infinite nature. The question that should haunt us today is whether we can afford to remain ignorant of it any longer. Because what they tried so desperately to hide is exactly what we need most urgently to remember. Picture yourself standing in a room, convinced that the four walls around you represent the totality of existence. This is precisely how humanity has been conditioned to perceive reality, trapped within the narrow confines of three-dimensional thinking, believing that what we can touch, see, and measure constitutes the full spectrum of what's real. The Emerald Tablets shatter this illusion completely. According to Thoth's teachings, our three-dimensional reality isn't the foundation of existence. It's actually one of the densest, most limited planes of consciousness available. Think of it as the basement level of a vast cosmic skyscraper, where we've been living our entire lives without realizing there are countless floors above us, each operating under entirely different laws of physics, time, and space. The tablets describe reality as a multi-layered construct where each dimension functions as a complete universe with its own governing principles. What we call physical laws in our 3D world, gravity, linear time, cause and effect, these are merely the operating system of the lowest dimensional plane. As consciousness ascends through higher dimensions, these limitations begin to dissolve like ice melting into water. Let me break down what the tablets reveal about the architecture of these higher realms. The fourth dimension, according to Thoth's teachings, is where time begins to lose its tyrannical grip over consciousness. In our 3D reality, we experience time as a rigid, forward-moving river that carries us from birth to death with no possibility of deviation. But in 4D awareness, time becomes more like an ocean where consciousness can move in multiple directions simultaneously. People who've experienced spontaneous 4D shifts often describe moments where hours pass like minutes, or conversely, where seconds stretch into what feels like hours. This isn't metaphorical, it's a fundamental shift in how consciousness interfaces with temporal reality. The tablets explain that in the fourth dimension, the soul begins to perceive multiple probability streams simultaneously, seeing not just what is, but what could be, and what has been across various timelines. The fifth dimension takes this liberation even further. Here, the tablets describe space itself beginning to dissolve as a limiting factor. Physical distance becomes irrelevant because consciousness operates through resonance rather than location. In 5D awareness, you don't travel to a place, you align your vibrational frequency with it and instantly exist there. This explains phenomena that our 3D science dismisses as impossible: remote viewing, telepathic communication across vast distances, and the ability of advanced practitioners to appear in multiple locations simultaneously. These aren't supernatural abilities. They're natural functions of consciousness operating from higher dimensional perspectives. But here's where the tablets become truly revolutionary in their implications. They teach that human identity itself undergoes radical transformation as we ascend dimensionally. In our current 3D existence, we identify completely with our physical bodies, believing ourselves to be separate, isolated beings competing for limited resources in a hostile universe. As consciousness expands into 4D awareness, identity begins to encompass what the tablets call the oversoul, the recognition that your individual consciousness is actually part of a larger, multidimensional being that exists across multiple timelines and realities simultaneously. The boundaries between self and other start to blur, not through loss of individuality, but through expansion of what individual actually means. In 5D consciousness, this expansion accelerates exponentially. Identity becomes fluid, able to encompass entire groups, species, or planetary consciousness, while still maintaining its unique perspective. The tablets describe advanced beings who can simultaneously exist as individual entities and as collective consciousness, switching between these states as easily as we might shift our attention from reading to listening. The practical manifestations of these dimensional shifts are profound and measurable. People experiencing 4D consciousness often report time dilation effects, meditation sessions that feel like minutes but last for hours, or conversely, brief moments of insight that contain lifetimes of understanding. They begin to perceive synchronicities not as coincidences, but as evidence of the interconnected web of causality that becomes visible from higher dimensional perspectives. Linear cause and effect, the bedrock of 3D thinking, dissolves into something far more complex and elegant. Events begin to influence each other across time, with effects sometimes preceding their apparent causes. This isn't chaos, it's a higher order of organization that our 3D minds simply lack the framework to comprehend. The tablets are explicit about why most humans remain trapped in lower dimensional awareness. It's not a natural limitation, it's conditioning. From birth, we're trained to focus exclusively on physical reality, to dismiss intuitive knowing, and to fragment our consciousness into tiny, manageable pieces that can be easily controlled and predicted. Our educational systems, religious institutions, and social structures all reinforce 3D thinking patterns. We're taught to compete rather than collaborate, to fear death rather than understand it as dimensional transition, and to seek external validation rather than developing our innate capacity for higher dimensional perception. But the tablets reveal that consciousness itself is the key to dimensional travel. Every thought, emotion, and intention carries a specific vibrational frequency. By learning to consciously modulate these frequencies, we can literally tune our awareness to different dimensional planes. This isn't abstract philosophy, it's practical technology. The ancient mystery schools developed specific techniques for raising consciousness through dimensional barriers, breathwork that alters brainwave states, sound frequencies that resonate with higher dimensional patterns, and meditation practices that gradually expand awareness beyond physical limitations. The most profound revelation in the tablets is that we're already multidimensional beings. We're not trying to become something we're not. We're remembering what we've always been. Every night in deep sleep, consciousness naturally shifts into 4D and 5D states. Every moment of intuitive knowing, creative inspiration, or unconditional love is evidence of our multidimensional nature breaking through the conditioning that keeps us locked in 3D perception. The question isn't whether higher dimensions exist or whether we can access them. The question is whether we're ready to release the comfortable limitations of our current reality and step into the vast, magnificent architecture of consciousness that the tablets reveal as our true inheritance. What if I told you that Thoth wasn't some mythological figure lost to ancient legend, but an actual person who documented his travels between dimensions with the precision of a scientist and the wisdom of someone who had literally transcended death itself? The man we call Thoth existed as both high priest and immortal, a being who had mastered what he called the Great Transition, and chose to remain in physical form to teach others. His writings weren't philosophical speculation. They were detailed field reports from someone who had spent millennia moving consciously between dimensional planes, mapping territories of existence that most humans never glimpse even in dreams. In the tablets, Thoth describes his first conscious dimensional shift with startling clarity. He writes about learning to separate what he calls his body of light from Vusantu Third, his physical form, not through death, but through precise manipulation of his vibrational frequency. Picture trying to tune into a radio station. You adjust the dial until the static clears, and suddenly you're receiving a completely different broadcast. Thoth discovered that consciousness works the same way. He explains that most humans remain trapped in three-dimensional awareness because they've been conditioned to believe their physical body is their only vehicle of existence. But Thoth had learned something revolutionary. We actually possess multiple bodies operating at different vibrational frequencies simultaneously. The physical body is just the densest, most obvious one. His technique began with what he called the stilling of the waters, achieving a state where thoughts, emotions, and physical sensations became perfectly calm. From this stillness, he would gradually increase his vibrational frequency through controlled breathing and focused intention. He describes the sensation as feeling lighter and lighter, until suddenly the physical world would become translucent around him. But here's where Thoth's account becomes truly extraordinary. He didn't just visit one higher dimension. He mapped an entire hierarchy of planes, each with its own laws of physics, its own inhabitants, and its own possibilities for existence. In what he called the fourth dimension, time became fluid. He could observe past and future events as easily as looking left or right. Physical matter responded directly to thought, allowing him to create and reshape reality through pure intention. The fifth dimension, according to Thoth, operated on pure geometric principles. Beings existed as living mathematical forms, conscious patterns that could communicate through direct transmission of knowledge rather than language. He describes encountering entities that appeared as spinning geometric shapes, each one containing entire universes of information that they could share instantaneously. In the sixth dimension, Thoth found what he called the realm of pure creation, a plane where consciousness itself became the fundamental building block of reality. Here, he encountered beings of such expanded awareness that they existed simultaneously across multiple dimensions, maintaining coherent identity while experiencing countless different forms of existence at once. But Thoth's writings contain serious warnings about dimensional travel. He emphasizes that attempting to access higher planes without proper preparation can shatter human consciousness. The unprepared mind, he explains, simply cannot process the expanded reality of higher dimensions. It's like trying to download the entire internet onto a calculator. The system overloads and crashes. This is why he developed such rigorous purification practices. Before attempting dimensional travel, Thoth required years of mental discipline, emotional balance, and what he called the clearing of karmic debris, resolving all unfinished psychological and spiritual business that could create turbulence during transition. He describes meeting unprepared souls who had attempted dimensional shifts and become lost between planes, conscious but unable to return to physical form or successfully transition to higher states. They existed in what he called the gray zones, trapped in twilight states of awareness, neither fully incarnate nor successfully transcended. For advanced practitioners, Thoth taught techniques for maintaining what he called multi-dimensional coherence, existing consciously on several planes simultaneously. He describes his own experience of sitting in the temple conducting physical ceremonies while simultaneously traveling through higher dimensions, gathering knowledge that he would then translate into teachings for his students. The key to everything, according to Thoth, was understanding vibration as the fundamental force underlying all existence. He developed specific practices for raising vibrational frequency, particular breathing patterns, geometric visualizations, and sacred sound combinations that could literally tune consciousness to different dimensional frequencies. Most fascinating are his descriptions of why humans remain locked in three-dimensional awareness. Thoth explains that we're not victims of some external force keeping us trapped. Instead, we've become addicted to the density and drama of physical existence. The emotional intensity, the struggle, the constant stimulation. It creates a kind of consciousness that finds the subtlety of higher dimensions boring or incomprehensible. Breaking free requires what Thoth called developing a taste for the subtle. This meant learning to find profound meaning in stillness, silence, and the barely perceptible shifts in energy that signal dimensional boundaries. Most people, he observed, are so addicted to mental noise and emotional turbulence that they literally cannot perceive the gentle vibrations that would allow dimensional travel. When we examine modern reports of spontaneous dimensional experiences, near-death experiences, profound meditation states, certain psychedelic journeys, we see patterns that match exactly what Thoth described. People report moving through geometric tunnels of light, encountering beings of pure consciousness, experiencing time as fluid, and accessing knowledge that seems impossible to contain in normal awareness. Thoth's legacy wasn't just his personal achievements in dimensional travel. He established a complete educational system for developing these abilities in others. His teachings suggest that dimensional travel isn't some rare mystical gift. It's a natural human capacity that we've simply forgotten how to use. The question isn't whether higher dimensions exist. Thoth proved they do through direct experience and documented his findings for anyone willing to undertake the necessary preparation. The question is whether we're ready to reclaim our birthright as multi-dimensional beings and follow the roadmap he left for us. When Thoth recorded his dimensional travels in the Emerald Tablets, he wasn't just documenting exotic realms beyond our reality. He was revealing something far more practical and immediate, the fundamental operating system of the universe itself. And at the heart of this system lies a principle so elegant, so universally applicable, that it became the foundation of all genuine esoteric knowledge. As above, so below. As within, so without. You've probably heard these words before, maybe dismissed them as mystical poetry or New Age fluff. But here's what most people don't understand. This isn't metaphorical language. It's a precise technical description of how reality actually functions across all dimensions and scales. Think about this for a moment. When you look at satellite images of neurons in your brain and compare them to photographs of galactic superclusters, they're virtually identical. The branching patterns of blood vessels in your lungs mirror the branching patterns of river deltas, lightning bolts, and the cosmic web that connects galaxies. Your heart rhythm follows the same mathematical patterns as solar cycles, stock market fluctuations, and the orbital mechanics of planetary systems. This isn't coincidence. It's the universe revealing its deepest secret. The same fundamental patterns repeat at every level of reality, from the quantum to the cosmic. And according to the tablets, understanding this principle is absolutely crucial for anyone attempting to navigate higher dimensions. Here's why this matters so much. When Thoth describes traveling between dimensional realms, he consistently emphasizes that successful navigation depends on recognizing familiar patterns in unfamiliar territory. Imagine you're lost in a foreign city, but you notice that the street layout follows the same grid pattern as your hometown. Suddenly, navigation becomes possible, because you can apply known patterns to unknown terrain. The human body serves as the perfect microcosmic map of macrocosmic reality. Your nervous system, with its central processing unit in the brain and networks extending throughout your body, directly mirrors the structure of universal consciousness, a central source with infinite extensions into all aspects of reality. When you learn to consciously work with your own nervous system, you're simultaneously learning to work with the universal energy networks that connect all dimensions. Consider your circulatory system. Blood flows from your heart through increasingly smaller vessels, carrying life force to every cell, then returns through venous networks back to the source. This exact pattern governs how consciousness flows through dimensional reality, emanating from a central source, differentiating into increasingly specific manifestations, then returning enriched with experience. Ancient initiates who mastered circulation meditation weren't just improving their health, they were learning to consciously participate in the circulation of cosmic consciousness itself. But the mirror principle goes even deeper than physical structures. Your individual consciousness operates according to the same laws as cosmic consciousness, just at a different scale. When you experience a sudden insight, an aha moment where scattered information suddenly coheres into understanding, you're experiencing the same process by which new realities crystallize in higher dimensions. The difference is scale and scope, not fundamental mechanism. This is why the tablets emphasize self-knowledge as the prerequisite for dimensional travel. You can't navigate what you don't understand, and you can't understand external patterns until you've mapped the internal patterns they mirror. Every emotion you experience, every thought pattern that runs through your mind, every energetic shift in your body has a corresponding pattern in the larger dimensions of reality. Here's where this becomes practically revolutionary, because these patterns mirror each other. Working consciously with one level automatically affects all the others. When you heal a limiting belief pattern in your personal consciousness, you're simultaneously healing that same pattern wherever it appears in the collective consciousness. When you balance the energy systems in your body, you're contributing to the balance of energy systems throughout the universe. Ancient Egyptian initiates used this principle as their primary tool for dimensional work. They would spend years mapping their own internal landscape, every fear, every desire, every energetic pathway, every subtle state of consciousness. Not for self-obsession, but because this internal map was literally their navigation system for external dimensions. They discovered that specific internal states correspond to specific dimensional frequencies. Cultivate a particular quality of love in your heart, and you naturally attune to dimensions where that love quality predominates. Master a certain type of mental clarity, and dimensions operating at that clarity level become accessible. This isn't metaphor, it's practical dimensional technology. The tablets describe reality as essentially holographic. Every part contains the whole, and the whole is reflected in every part. This means your individual consciousness isn't separate from cosmic consciousness. It's a localized expression of it, containing all the same fundamental patterns and potentials. Understanding your own consciousness gives you the keys to understanding universal consciousness. Modern science is finally catching up to this ancient insight. Fractal mathematics shows us how identical patterns repeat at every scale in natural systems. Holographic theory suggests that all information in any system is contained in every part of that system. Quantum mechanics reveals that the act of observation, consciousness itself, plays a fundamental role in determining physical reality. But the tablets go further than our current science. They provide specific techniques for working consciously with these mirror relationships. When you understand that your internal emotional states directly influence external circumstances through dimensional resonance, emotional mastery becomes a form of reality engineering. When you recognize that your thought patterns are literally shaping the mental dimension that influences physical events, mental discipline becomes practical magic. This knowledge was considered so powerful because it reveals human beings as conscious participants in reality creation rather than passive victims of circumstance. Once you understand the mirror principle, you realize that changing yourself changes your world, not through positive thinking or wishful hoping, but through precise work with the actual mechanisms by which dimensions interface with each other. The initiates knew something we're just rediscovering. Consciousness isn't produced by matter, matter is produced by consciousness. And the patterns of your individual consciousness are the same patterns operating at every level of reality. Master your internal patterns, and you gain access to the universal patterns that govern all dimensions. This is why serious dimensional work always begins with serious self-work. You are the universe in miniature, and the universe is you in magnitude. Understanding this relationship isn't just philosophical insight, it's the practical foundation for everything that follows in our exploration of higher dimensional reality. When Thoth describes sacred geometry in the tablets, he's not talking about static mathematical formulas you'd find in a textbook. He's describing something far more extraordinary, living architectural blueprints that respond to consciousness itself. Think about that for a moment. In higher dimensions, geometry isn't just structure, it's alive, breathing, and interactive. The tablets reveal that what we call sacred geometry is actually the fundamental construction language of multidimensional reality. Just as we use steel and concrete to build our three-dimensional structures, higher dimensions are constructed from what Thoth calls living light, conscious energy that organizes itself into geometric patterns based on universal principles that exist far beyond our physical realm. Here's where it gets fascinating. Thoth describes how certain geometric forms serve as the basic building blocks of dimensional architecture. The spiral appears repeatedly in his accounts, not as decoration but as a functional structure. He explains that spirals create what we might think of as dimensional highways, pathways that consciousness can follow to move between different levels of reality. The golden ratio, that mathematical relationship we see everywhere in nature, isn't just aesthetically pleasing. According to the tablets, it represents the optimal resonance frequency for dimensional stability. When you examine Thoth's descriptions carefully, you realize he's providing a construction manual. He details how specific geometric relationships create what he calls dimensional doorways, stable openings between different levels of reality. The vesica piscis, formed when two circles intersect, creates what he describes as a lens through which consciousness can focus and transition between dimensions. The tetrahedron serves as an anchor point, providing structural stability during dimensional travel. But here's what makes this knowledge revolutionary. In higher dimensions, thought becomes a literal creative force. The tablets describe how focused intention instantly shapes geometric reality. Imagine being able to think a structure into existence, with geometric patterns responding immediately to your consciousness. This isn't metaphor. Thoth presents this as the fundamental operating principle of higher dimensional space. The concept of living light deserves deeper exploration because it challenges everything we think we know about the nature of reality. Thoth describes this not as simple illumination, but as conscious energy that forms the actual substrate of higher dimensional space. This living light organizes itself according to geometric principles, creating the framework within which higher dimensional experiences occur. It's responsive, intelligent, and serves as both the building material and the communication medium of these realms. What's remarkable is how consistently these geometric patterns appear in documented higher consciousness experiences. People who achieve deep meditative states, near-death experiences, or other expanded awareness report encountering specific geometric forms, complex mandalas that seem to pulse with life, crystalline structures that sing with harmonic frequencies, and tunnel-like spirals that serve as pathways to other realms. These aren't random hallucinations, they're encounters with the actual geometric infrastructure that Thoth mapped thousands of years ago. The practical implications are staggering. The tablets suggest that working with sacred geometry in our three-dimensional reality serves as training for higher dimensional navigation. When you study the geometric relationships in a flower, trace the spiral of a nautilus shell, or contemplate the proportions of ancient temples, you're actually preparing your consciousness to recognize and work with these same principles in expanded states of awareness. This explains why ancient civilizations built their most important structures according to these geometric principles. The pyramids of Egypt, the temples of Greece, the stone circles of Britain, these weren't just impressive architecture. They were dimensional anchoring points, structures designed to create stable connections between our physical reality and higher dimensional space. The builders understood something we're only beginning to rediscover, that certain geometric configurations can literally open doorways to expanded consciousness. Modern physics is starting to catch up with these ancient insights. Quantum mechanics reveals that space-time itself has geometric properties. String theory suggests that the fundamental particles of reality are actually geometric vibrations. The holographic principle indicates that information can be encoded in geometric patterns at dimensional boundaries. We're discovering that consciousness and geometry are intimately connected at the deepest levels of reality. The tablets provide specific guidance for working with these principles. Thoth describes meditation techniques using geometric visualization, methods for attuning consciousness to specific geometric frequencies, and practices for stabilizing awareness during dimensional experiences. He emphasizes that understanding these patterns isn't just intellectual, it requires direct experiential engagement. When you begin working with sacred geometry as Thoth describes, something remarkable happens. You start recognizing these patterns everywhere, not just in nature and ancient architecture, but in the actual structure of your thoughts and experiences. The geometry becomes a language, a way of communicating with the deeper patterns that organize reality across all dimensions. The most profound realization from studying these teachings is that we're not separate from this geometric reality, we're expressions of it. Our consciousness operates according to these same principles, and by understanding them, we gain the ability to navigate and create within the vast multidimensional landscape that the tablets reveal exists all around us, waiting for us to develop the geometric literacy to explore it. In sections 5 and 6, we explored how reality mirrors itself across dimensions and how sacred geometry forms the living architecture of higher realms. But here's where the tablets get brutally practical. They don't just describe these dimensions, they give you the actual keys to access them. And those keys? They're frequencies. Everything that exists vibrates. Your coffee mug, your thoughts, the chair you're sitting in, all of it is energy oscillating at specific rates. The tablets describe this as the fundamental law governing dimensional access. The consciousness can only perceive and interact with realities that match its vibrational frequency. It's like having a radio that can only tune into stations broadcasting on your current bandwidth. Most humans, according to the tablets, are stuck broadcasting on what we might call survival FM, frequencies dominated by fear, scarcity, competition, and material obsession. These lower frequency bands correspond to our familiar three-dimensional reality, where consciousness experiences itself as separate, limited, and vulnerable. The tablets suggest this isn't accidental. Here's where it gets interesting. The text describes how certain environmental factors actively suppress our natural frequency range. Processed foods literally lower cellular vibration through chemical interference. Electromagnetic pollution from our devices creates chaotic frequency patterns that disrupt coherent brainwave states. Even the 60 Hz electrical grid in most buildings can entrain our nervous systems into artificial rhythms that keep consciousness locked in narrow bandwidth perception. But the tablets don't stop at identifying the problem. They provide specific frequency-raising techniques that sound remarkably similar to practices modern neuroscience is just beginning to validate. The first technique involves what the text calls harmonic breathing. This isn't your typical meditation instruction. The tablets describe a specific pattern. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 7, exhale for 8, repeated in cycles of 4 breaths, then rest for 30 seconds. Modern research on heart rate variability shows this exact pattern optimizes coherence between heart rhythm and brain waves, creating measurable shifts in electromagnetic field strength around the body. Sound frequencies play a crucial role. The tablets mention specific tonal vibrations that can literally tune consciousness to higher dimensional awareness. Interestingly, these frequencies, particularly 528 Hz and 741 Hz, are now being studied for their effects on DNA repair and cellular regeneration. Ancient Tibetan singing bowls, Egyptian ceremonial chambers, and Gothic cathedrals were all designed around these mathematical relationships. I've personally experimented with some of these techniques, and the effects are undeniable. After consistent practice with the harmonic breathing pattern, I noticed my dream recall increased dramatically, and during meditation, I began experiencing what I can only describe as dimensional bleed-through, glimpses of geometric patterns and landscapes that felt more real than ordinary waking consciousness. The tablets warn extensively about frequency mismatches. Attempting to access higher dimensional awareness without proper vibrational preparation can cause what they describe as consciousness fragmentation. Think of it like trying to run high-definition video on a dial-up connection. The system can't handle the bandwidth and crashes. This explains why many people who use psychedelics or intense meditation practices without proper preparation often experience psychological instability, or what we might call spiritual emergency. Emotional states directly correlate with frequency ranges. The tablets describe fear, anger, and resentment as dense vibrations that anchor consciousness in lower dimensions. But here's the crucial point. They're not suggesting you suppress these emotions. Instead, they recommend a process of frequency alchemy, consciously experiencing these states while simultaneously raising your overall vibration through breathing and sound work. Gratitude, curiosity, and what the prime tablets call impersonal love naturally elevate frequency. But this isn't about forcing positive thinking. It's about recognizing that these emotional states literally change the oscillation rate of your consciousness, opening access to dimensional frequencies that remain invisible from lower vibrational perspectives. The practical applications are fascinating. The tablets suggest that dietary changes can significantly impact dimensional access. Living foods, fresh fruits, vegetables, clean water, vibrate at higher frequencies than processed, dead foods. Fasting is described as a rapid frequency elevator because it reduces the energy required for digestion, allowing consciousness to allocate more resources to higher-order processing. Modern biofeedback technology is validating these ancient insights. Devices that measure brain coherence, heart rate variability, and electromagnetic field strength show measurable changes when people practice these frequency-raising techniques. We're literally seeing consciousness expand its bandwidth in real time. The tablets also describe environmental frequency enhancement. Spending time in nature, particularly near moving water or in forests, naturally elevates human vibration because these environments generate negative ions and coherent electromagnetic fields. Crystal formations are mentioned as frequency stabilizers, specific mineral structures that can help maintain elevated consciousness states during dimensional exploration. If you want to begin experimenting with frequency elevation, start simple. Try the harmonic breathing pattern for 10 minutes daily. Notice how your awareness changes. Pay attention to your dreams. Observe whether your intuition becomes clearer or your creative insights more frequent. The most profound insight from the tablets regarding frequency is this: higher dimensions aren't separate places you travel to, they're expanded bandwidth states of the consciousness you already possess. Every human has the innate capacity to perceive these realms. We've simply been conditioned to operate on limited frequencies. As we'll explore in our next section, once you begin expanding your vibrational range, you start accessing what the tablets call the living library, a vast repository of knowledge that exists in higher dimensional space, waiting for consciousness capable of tuning into its frequency. Here's the thing about dimensional imprisonment that nobody talks about. It's not accidental. The moment you were born into this society, a sophisticated system began training your consciousness to perceive only 3 dimensions. Think about your earliest memories of school, sitting in rows, facing forward, told to pay attention to what's directly in front of you. That's not education, that's dimensional conditioning. The Emerald Tablets describe this process with startling clarity. They explain how human consciousness naturally exists in a multi-dimensional state, but gets systematically compressed into 3-dimensional awareness through what they call the Great Forgetting. This isn't some mystical concept. It's a documented process of neural pathway limitation that begins in infancy. Watch a young child sometime. Before age 3, they regularly interact with things adults can't see, hear sounds from nowhere, and describe experiences that don't fit our dimensional box. We call it imagination, but the tablets suggest something far more profound. These children are still accessing their natural multidimensional awareness. Then comes school, socialization, and the relentless message that reality consists only of what you can touch, see, and measure. Your educational system played a crucial role in this dimensional imprisonment. Remember how you learned about time? Linear progression from past to present to future, measured in precise increments. But the tablets describe time as multidimensional, flowing in spirals, loops, and simultaneous streams. Indigenous cultures worldwide maintained this understanding for millennia, until colonization imposed linear time consciousness. Now we're all trapped in what the tablets call the tyranny of sequential thinking. The frequency work we explored earlier becomes essential here because breaking dimensional imprisonment requires more than intellectual understanding. It demands vibrational recalibration. Your nervous system has been conditioned to filter out frequencies that carry multidimensional information. When you encounter experiences that don't fit the 3-dimensional model, your brain literally edits them out before they reach conscious awareness. This editing process happens through what neuroscientists call the reticular activating system, but the tablets describe it as the guardian at the threshold. This mechanism filters reality to match your programmed expectations. If you've been taught that psychic phenomena don't exist, your consciousness won't register psychic experiences even when they occur. The guardian protects your dimensional prison by making it invisible. Breaking free begins with recognizing these filtering mechanisms in action. Start paying attention to information your mind automatically dismisses. That sudden knowing about someone before they call, the dreams that later manifest in waking life, the sense of presence when you're supposedly alone. These aren't anomalies, they're glimpses of your natural multidimensional awareness breaking through the conditioning. The tablets outline a systematic approach to dimensional liberation that involves 3 stages: recognition, deconstruction, and reconstruction. Recognition means identifying the specific beliefs that maintain your 3-dimensional prison. These aren't just personal beliefs, they're cultural agreements about the nature of reality that you inherited without question. Deconstruction involves systematically challenging these inherited limitations. The tablets suggest starting with time, perception because it's the foundation of dimensional imprisonment. Practice experiencing moments outside linear sequence. When you're deeply absorbed in creative work or meditation, notice how time becomes fluid. These experiences aren't escapes from reality, they're glimpses of multidimensional time consciousness. Space perception comes next. Your eyes have been trained to see objects as separate, solid, and fixed. But quantum physics confirms what the tablets have always taught. Everything exists in a state of dynamic interconnection. Begin practicing what they call field perception, sensing the energetic connections between seemingly separate objects. This isn't visualization, it's retraining your awareness to perceive the multidimensional field that connects all things. The reconstruction phase involves building new neural pathways that support expanded awareness. This requires consistent practice because your brain will naturally default to familiar 3-dimensional patterns. The sacred geometry practices we discussed earlier become crucial tools here. Working with these patterns literally rewires your consciousness to perceive multidimensional structures. Here's where most people encounter serious obstacles. Society doesn't support dimensional expansion. It actively discourages it. When you begin perceiving beyond the three-dimensional consensus, you might face ridicule, isolation, or pressure to return to normal. The tablets warn about this challenge and emphasize the importance of finding others who support your expansion. This is why mystery schools and esoteric communities have always existed. They provide safe spaces for consciousness to explore beyond conventional limitations. Without this support, many people abandon their dimensional expansion when social pressure becomes intense. The isolation can feel overwhelming when you're perceiving realities that others can't see or understand. Integration presents another major challenge. How do you function in a three-dimensional society while maintaining multidimensional awareness? The tablets describe this as walking between worlds, and it requires developing what they call dimensional flexibility, the ability to shift between different levels of perception as circumstances require. This flexibility manifests in practical ways. Enhanced intuition becomes a natural part of decision-making. Synchronicities multiply because you're perceiving the multidimensional patterns that create them. Healing abilities emerge as you access the frequency dimensions where transformation occurs. Information arrives through channels beyond the five senses because you're no longer limiting yourself to conventional input methods. The key insight from the tablets is that dimensional expansion happens gradually and naturally when you remove the barriers that prevent it. Forcing rapid shifts often creates instability and can be genuinely dangerous. Your nervous system needs time to adapt to processing multidimensional information. Rushing this process can result in psychological fragmentation or inability to function in consensus reality. The most important thing to understand is this: you're not trying to become something you're not. You're removing the conditioning that prevents you from being what you naturally are. Your consciousness is already multidimensional. The work isn't about gaining new abilities. It's about removing the limitations that hide your existing capabilities. This perspective changes everything about the process. Instead of striving to achieve some extraordinary state, you're simply returning to your natural condition. The tablets call this remembering the eternal present, reconnecting with the multidimensional awareness that exists beyond the prison of conditioned perception. Here's what they never told you about death. It's not the end of your story, it's graduation day. And the Emerald Tablets reveal exactly why understanding this transforms everything about how you live right now. Most people spend their entire lives terrified of death because they've been conditioned to see it as the ultimate failure, the final defeat. But Thoth describes death as something completely different, a conscious transition between dimensional states. Think about it. If consciousness can shift between dimensions while you're alive, as we've explored with frequency work and breaking three-dimensional conditioning, why would physical death be any different? It's simply the most dramatic example of dimensional travel you'll ever experience. The tablets describe death as consciousness shedding its densest vibrational anchor, the physical body, and moving into higher frequency dimensional spaces. But here's the crucial part. How this transition unfolds depends entirely on your level of preparation and understanding. An unprepared consciousness experiences this shift chaotically, like being thrown into turbulent waters without knowing how to swim. A prepared consciousness navigates the transition deliberately, maintaining awareness and choice throughout the process. Thoth explains that during the death transition, consciousness first experiences a rapid acceleration in vibrational frequency. The energy patterns that maintained physical form begin dissolving, but consciousness itself, your essential awareness, remains intact. This is why so many near-death experiences describe moving through tunnels of light or encountering beings of pure energy. You're literally witnessing consciousness adjusting to higher dimensional perception as the constraints of three-dimensional sensory processing fall away. But the ancient Egyptian initiates didn't wait until death to understand this process. They practiced conscious dying while fully alive. Through specific meditation techniques and energy work, they would deliberately induce states where consciousness temporarily separated from dense physical identification. They learned to navigate these transitional spaces, mapping the territories they would eventually traverse permanently. The practical preparation involves several key elements. First, developing comfort with consciousness existing independently of physical sensation. Regular meditation that moves beyond body awareness trains you for this separation. Second, learning to maintain coherent thought and intention during altered states. When your usual reference points dissolve, can you still direct your awareness purposefully? Third, cultivating emotional neutrality toward the dissolution of familiar forms. Fear creates energetic turbulence that makes dimensional transitions chaotic and disorienting. The tablets also describe something remarkable. Advanced practitioners who mastered dimensional travel could choose their transition timing and method. They weren't subject to random death from disease or accident because they understood how to maintain coherence across dimensional boundaries. Some chose to transition consciously at specific times for specific purposes. Others learned to maintain awareness simultaneously across multiple dimensional levels, essentially transcending the need for death entirely. This connects directly to the frequency work we discussed earlier. When you can consciously adjust your vibrational state, death becomes just another frequency shift, significant, but not fundamentally different from other dimensional experiences you've already practiced. The fear dissolves because you understand the mechanics involved. Modern near-death research consistently supports these ancient teachings. People who experience clinical death and return describe encountering realms that operate by different physical laws, meeting conscious beings without physical forms, and accessing information impossible to obtain through normal sensory channels. They're experiencing exactly what Thoth described: consciousness operating in higher dimensional spaces with expanded perceptual capabilities. But understanding your immortal nature changes how you approach everything in current life. Decisions become less driven by survival anxiety and more aligned with consciousness development. Relationships shift from desperate attachment to appreciative connection. Personal growth becomes preparation for expanded existence rather than just improvement within limitation. The tablets warn specifically about unprepared consciousness encountering dimensional transitions. Without proper preparation, awareness can become fragmented or confused during the frequency shift. This is why mystery schools throughout history emphasized preparation for death as essential spiritual work. They understood that how you die determines the quality of your continued existence in higher dimensions. Practical preparation involves daily practices that expand your comfort with non-physical awareness. Spend time in deep meditation where body sensation fades. Practice maintaining clear intention during altered states induced through breathwork or other techniques. Develop emotional equanimity about change and loss. Study your own consciousness during dream states, which are practice runs for dimensional transitions. The most profound teaching in the tablets about death concerns conscious choice. Advanced practitioners don't experience death as something happening to them. They experience it as something they're actively participating in. They maintain awareness, intention, and even preference throughout the transition. Death becomes a conscious act rather than an unconscious event. This knowledge transforms fear into curiosity and limitation into preparation. When you understand death as dimensional graduation, every day becomes an opportunity to develop the skills you'll eventually need for the ultimate journey. The ancient wisdom isn't asking you to believe anything. It's providing a framework for direct experience and conscious preparation. Your immortal nature isn't some distant spiritual concept. It's the fundamental reality of consciousness itself, temporarily focused through physical form but never actually limited by it. Understanding this changes everything about how you live, love, and grow in the time you have in this particular dimensional classroom. Here you stand at the threshold of the most profound choice any human being can make. Everything we've explored together, the nature of reality as a multidimensional ladder, the mechanisms that keep consciousness locked in three-dimensional perception, even death itself as merely a graduation ceremony to higher states, all of this knowledge converges on this single moment of decision. You now understand that your consciousness isn't trapped in flesh, bound by linear time, or limited to the narrow band of experience most people call reality. The Emerald Tablets didn't just describe individual transformation. They mapped the evolutionary blueprint for our entire species. What Thoth revealed wasn't ancient history. It was prophecy about the choice facing humanity right now. The comfortable prison of three-dimensional existence offers security. You know its rules, its limitations, its predictable cycles of birth, struggle, and death. Most people will choose to remain there, and there's no judgment in that choice. But once you've seen through the veil, once you've glimpsed the infinite expanse of consciousness that awaits, can you really go back to pretending those walls are real? Your multidimensional awakening begins with a fundamental shift in how you perceive yourself. Stop identifying as a body having occasional spiritual experiences and start recognizing yourself as eternal consciousness temporarily focused through physical form. This isn't positive thinking or wishful belief. It's remembering what you actually are beneath layers of conditioning. The first practical step involves what I call dimensional breathing. Spend 10 minutes each morning breathing with the conscious intention of expanding beyond your physical boundaries. As you inhale, visualize drawing energy not just into your lungs but into your entire energy field. As you exhale, feel your awareness extending outward, touching dimensions beyond the physical. This isn't meditation, it's consciousness calibration, training your awareness to operate beyond its habitual limitations. Next, begin questioning every assumption about reality that you've never examined. Why do you believe time only moves forward? Because you've been told it does. Why do you think consciousness ends at death? Because that's the collective agreement. Start living as if these limitations are suggestions rather than laws. Notice how reality responds when you stop giving these boundaries your unconscious consent. But here's where wisdom becomes crucial. The path to multidimensional awareness isn't about forcing dramatic experiences or trying to skip levels of development. I've seen people attempt to blast through dimensional barriers through extreme practices or substances, only to find themselves psychologically fragmented and spiritually ungrounded. True dimensional expansion happens through consistent, patient cultivation of expanded awareness. Think of it like physical fitness. You don't go from being sedentary to running marathons in a week. Your consciousness needs time to develop the strength and stability to operate in higher dimensions. Start with 5-dimensional thinking, considering how your choices ripple across multiple timelines simultaneously. When facing decisions, ask yourself, how does this serve my evolution across all possible versions of reality? This knowledge transforms everything. Your relationships become multidimensional exchanges where you're not just connecting with someone's personality, but with their eternal essence across multiple levels of existence. Your work becomes service to dimensional evolution. Whatever you do, you're helping consciousness expand its capacity for expression. Even challenges become opportunities for consciousness expansion, because you understand that every difficulty is actually your higher self creating conditions for breakthrough. The isolation trap kills more spiritual seekers than any other obstacle. Dimensional awakening isn't a solo journey. Seek out others who are walking this path, not spiritual tourists looking for weekend enlightenment, but serious practitioners committed to consciousness evolution. These connections form what Thoth called the chain of illumination, where each awakening consciousness makes it easier for others to break through dimensional barriers. As you begin accessing higher dimensions, you'll discover something profound. You naturally become a bridge for others ready for similar awakening. This isn't about becoming a teacher or guru. It's about embodying expanded consciousness so authentically that others remember their own multidimensional nature simply by being around you. You become what Thoth described as a keeper of the flame, maintaining dimensional awareness in a world still largely asleep to its true nature. Consider the implications if even a small percentage of humanity awakens to its multidimensional nature. Imagine civilization built on the understanding that consciousness is eternal, that reality is infinitely malleable, that death is just another transition. Wars become impossible when you recognize every enemy as another aspect of the same infinite consciousness. Scarcity becomes meaningless when you understand that consciousness can create any experience it chooses to focus upon. The Emerald Tablets weren't just describing individual transformation, they were revealing the next stage of human evolution. We're not meant to remain trapped in three-dimensional awareness any more than we were meant to remain single-celled organisms. The choice facing our species is simple: evolve or remain locked in cycles of limitation, conflict, and unconsciousness. Your journey begins now, not with dramatic revelations, but with the quiet decision to live as if you are what you actually are: eternal, multidimensional, creative consciousness wearing the temporary costume of human form. Every moment becomes an opportunity to choose expansion over limitation, awareness over unconsciousness, dimensional freedom over three-dimensional imprisonment. The ancient knowledge has been preserved, the path has been mapped. Your multidimensional destiny awaits your decision to step forward and claim what was always yours by birthright. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."